Trudeau, who is the most unpopular prime minister in Canadian history, instead of working with President Trump, has decided to pick a fight which he will lose.
All right, so before we get into today's top stories, as well as taking a look at the reactions that have happened over the past few hours, I'm sure you all have heard Donald Trump has agreed to put a 30-day pause on the tariffs that were supposed to hit us at 12 a.m. today. Now, when I was doing yesterday's video, the announcement came out that Trump and Trudeau would be having a follow-up conversation at 3 p.m., and this was following the conversation that they had already had at 9 a.m. At 9 a.m., it was announced that Mexico was getting a 30-day reprieve, yet nothing had been mentioned about Canada. After the call at 3 p.m., Trudeau decided to go to Twitter, and this was his announcement.
Major breaking news from the CBC's Karina Roman from Ottawa. Karina.
Okay, so the actual headline here is that Canada has also secured a pause on the tariffs for 30 days. And this is in a post on X by the Prime Minister. If I could just have the liberty to read it to everyone.
Absolutely.
So that they can see the background. He says, I just had a good call with President Trump. Canada is implementing our $1.3 billion border plan, reinforcing the border with new choppers, technology and personnel, enhanced coordination with our American partners, and increased resources to stop the flow of fentanyl. Nearly 10,000 frontline personnel are and will be working on protecting the border. Now, here's where the new stuff comes in. Oh, there, you've got it up. Great. In addition, Canada is making new commitments to appoint a fentanyl czar. We will list cartels as terrorists, ensure 24/7 eyes on the border, launch a Canada-U.S. joint strike force to combat organized crime, fentanyl, and money laundering. I've also signed a new intelligence directive on organized crime and fentanyl, and we will be backing it with $200 million. Proposed tariffs will be paused for at least 30 days while we work together.
Now listen, I'm very happy that we got the pause, but by no means does this mean we are out of the woods. And outside of Danielle Smith, the response from some of the other Canadian leaders has been absolutely atrocious when it comes to the tariff situation. Doug Ford, Wab Kinew, David Eby, these guys have essentially made this into a trade war rather than just listening to Trump and dealing with the border.
This is the ramifications when we stop selling $1 billion worth of liquor. And that goes across the country. A lot of premiers have called me up and said they're doing exactly the same. Tim Houston is doing it, and other provinces are doing it, and I encourage them to do it. I think this is a Team Canada approach. We have to stay united, and we have to make sure that we protect, in our case, Ontario jobs and Canadian jobs. That's what this is about.
Yeah, so, we spoke to some private retailers and folks who sell American booze, and what I would say is this: we're taking action as the government. We're pulling booze off of our shelves, and in the future, people in the private sector aren't going to be able to order booze through the wholesaler, but we're not being directive to them. And so some conversations and consultation happened, but as you saw over the course of the weekend, the situation is one that we have to respond to forcefully to stand up for ourselves as Canadians and Manitobans. Well, here's the great thing about cutting off American booze. The Canadian stuff is way better. Okay? So if your patriotic duty is to grab a 1919 or a Crown Royal, I think most Manitobans think that's a good deal. And when we're talking about the wholesale price, it's a perfect, better substitute, I would say, actually, a better substitute. So I think this is something that we're doing to send a message.
We're looking at all of the purchasing that we're doing. Just the liquor purchasing that we do here in British Columbia is $3.5 billion. We are, depending on how you do the math, in the top 5 purchasers of alcohol products in the world through our liquor distribution branch.
So it looks like all these premiers are just focused on booze and alcohol for some reason, yet they reiterated on American TV today that this is not a trade war. The executive order was very clear. This is about the border.
That there are places in big cities in Canada that look kind of like San Francisco because the drug war is being lost by this government in Canada as well. The good news is that in our conversations over the weekend, one of the things we've noticed is that the Mexicans are very, very serious about doing what President Trump said in the executive order, and that is getting more aggressive, much, much more aggressive about the drug war. But the Canadians appear to have misunderstood the plain language of the executive order, and they're interpreting it as a trade war. And I think that that's probably consistent with the policies that we've seen from this failed government in the past, where they've let their own drug problem get out of control. And instead of addressing the drug problem, they want to blame the U.S. and perhaps get some political benefit out of saying that Trump's tried to create a trade war. Why would he do that, with Canada and Mexico?
You're saying that this is really more of a negotiation to try and say, no, we want more focus on the border, and if you give that to us, these go away?
This is not what I'm saying. People need to read the executive order. President Trump has said this is about the fentanyl crisis, right? No, but so I don't know how somebody reads the executive order if you're Canada and then comes back and says, oh, we're going to start a trade war. We're saying we're really, really serious about going after fentanyl, and President Trump means it. And so there's all this fentanyl shipping across the borders. There, in the past, have been caravans of people parading across our border, carrying drugs and other things. And the response of our neighbors has not been, hey, we're going to help you stop this problem. It's go ahead and build a wall.
Now, you could say it's not about the border, but that seems pretty straightforward to me in terms of his executive order. And even if we take a look at the announcements that were made today, from the president of Mexico as well as our prime minister, they both talk solely about the border, increasing the number of bodies that will be patrolling the area. Trudeau saying that he's going to be appointing a fentanyl czar, cracking down on the cartels, doing money laundering. All of these things are border related. Nothing had to do with any sort of tit for tat tariff or trade. It simply had to do with the border. And with that being said, Danielle Smith put out a post kind of reaching out to the other premiers to bring down the rhetoric. And let's get back to the talking basis.
In a statement on social media, Smith says she's greatly heartened by the decision to work on the border. She says appointing a fentanyl czar is something the province has been calling for since talking with U.S. politicians. Smith is now calling for the federal government and other premiers to de-escalate rhetoric, abandon any non-tariff measures for the time being, and turn efforts entirely to advocacy and good faith negotiation. Now, Smith is going back to Washington with other premiers next week and again this month to meet with 27 Republican state governors.
Now, this may seem like a simple ask from Danielle Smith, yet we have individuals like Doug Ford even picking fights with Elon Musk. He announced that he has ripped up the Starlink deal that was worth $100 million, which would be providing multiple individuals in the rural community with internet access. However, with this announcement, Elon Musk replied to him simply saying, oh, well. So nobody really is taking our prime minister serious, the Ontario premier serious. But in terms of the rhetoric being de-escalated, our media has to do a little bit of a better job, I think, in terms of who they have on their platform. Now, I'm not calling for censorship, but when you have individuals going on there equating Donald Trump to a crack addict on a subway, I don't think that does Canada any good. Take a look.
What's your takeaway from that clip that we just played from Donald Trump from just a couple of hours ago?
Well, they've come off of 70 years of failed wars of occupation. The American, one thing you have to understand about these comments is that they come from a profound weakness that America really is unfamiliar with, and Canada is unfamiliar with America being this weak. They can't hold Baghdad. I'm not sure why they think they could hold Montreal, but I mean, they're also being kicked out of Niger, and they are weaker than they've ever been. In a lot of ways, they are extremely fragile as a country. They have absolutely no solidarity. They have absolutely no unity. They are in the middle of dismantling their administrative state. And war is a test fundamentally of the strength of the administrative state. So I think you should take this about as seriously as you would take the ramblings of a crack addict on the subway. I.e., you pay attention to it and you get out of the way and you do what you can. But, this is not something to be treated like an actual, something to be thought about. It's just the ramblings of lunacy.
Now, on top of that insane comment, this guy continuously pokes the U.S. by saying that they are weak, that they are, not capable, this and that. And I equate this to when Karina Gould just had her recent interview where she kept saying that we are smarter than Americans. The constant insulting of the American people or of Trump himself, not a good idea. But it wasn't the only display of this Trump derangement, as we had Charlie Angus, the NDP MP, going on CNN spewing basically his hatred for Trump as well.
And we're joined now by Charlie Angus. He is a member of the Canadian Parliament. You heard him there, sir. What I'd like is for Canada to become our 51st state. He said it before. He just said it again moments ago. Your reaction?
Well, what President Trump also said is that the tariffs will not come off until we give up our birthright and our sovereignty to a convicted predator. That is never, ever going to happen. So what Donald Trump has done is unified Canadians in a manner I've never seen before. And while Americans may be waking up to the tariffs, we've already started the pushback. People in Kentucky, did you know that your biggest export market for spirits is Canada? We just took everything off the shelves. California, did you know that the largest purchaser of wines in the world is the liquor agency in Ontario? You don't get any more California wines in Ontario. Elon Musk, our premier, just canceled a $100 million deal today. Canada is getting ready for this fight because we know he's erratic. It may be this week, it may be next week, but there's a huge actual boycott going on in grocery stores, ordinary people stopping me on the streets. Nobody is buying anything that comes out of the United States right now because we understand this is a threat to who we are as a nation.
Now, Charlie Angus seems to have flown off the handle. This guy's not running in the next election, and he's just been doing these media appearances, whether it's on TVO or the YouTube channel Midas Touch, CPAC, CNN, whatever he's on, just spewing nonsense. His Trump derangement is quite strong. But another individual, and I don't know if it's the water in Ontario that is doing this, but the former premier of Ontario, not Doug Ford, the former one, Bob Rae, was also on Fox today, and he was displaying his Trump derangement. Take a look.
Back to our lead story. Let's get some perspective on today's back and forth over tariffs from Canadian Ambassador to the United Nations, Bob Rae. Mr. Ambassador, thanks for the time.
My pleasure. Good
what
to
do you
be
make
with
of this today and this 30-day pause and what your prime minister has agreed to do and what may happen next?
Well, we've been talking with the administration for quite a long time about the border measures that we need to take, and we need to take together. We all take the drug issue seriously. It needs to be dealt with, but let's not use tariffs to deal with it, because the tariffs completely upset markets and upset employment and upset jobs on both sides of the border. There's no such thing, Brett, as an American car, a Canadian car. For the most part, the big three, they make their cars on both sides of the border. And when they do that and you create the tariffs, you automatically are taxing the consumers on both sides of the border. And we have just-in-time delivery for everything that we do. And there's just no room for fooling around with the integrity of this border by any means. And tariffs are a major threat to the economic security of both our country and yours. And it's important that we get that put aside for a moment. Let's talk about the long-term trading relationship, but don't keep using tariffs as a thing that you think you can play with without understanding the consequences of that for both of our economies. Very serious.
Now, I would like to believe Bob Rae when he says that they are not fooling around at the border, but when we just look at the statistics, it states in 2023, in fiscal year 2023, nearly 86% of the terrorist encounters at the U.S.-Canadian border were recorded by the U.S. Customs and Border Protection. The number increased to 93% by the middle of 2024, meaning on a terrorist watch list, 86% of those encounters were coming through the Canadian border into the U.S., and it rose to 93% coming into the U.S. So him saying, well, let's not mess around, no, we don't mess around with the border. Do you understand why Trump is concerned with who's being let in? I mean, we had multiple reports a while ago saying that the Indian students are applying for schooling, coming to Canada, dropping out immediately, getting the money back, and then just immediately crossing the border to go to the US. It's the fastest way for a lot of individuals to get into the US is come to Canada and then cross our border. So when he's saying that they're not messing around, it's extremely hard to believe fully. Now, it's not only the border, it seems like, with Trump, because there's the issue with the deficit, and there's quite a big deficit. Take a look.
Well, Mr. Ambassador, President Trump sees it obviously differently. He sees a trade deficit with Canada. The U.S. Census Bureau has it at $64.3 billion, but he puts it at over $100 billion, and sometimes, depending on how he talks about it, $150 billion.
Yeah, well,
either way, there is a major trade deficit with Canada. So to rectify that, they are saying, what are you going to come to the table with beyond these border provisions that the Prime Minister announced today?
Well, we have something called an agreement, a treaty, Brett, between our two countries that's been signed, sealed, and delivered.
Sure.
We have an auto pact.
Came under the Trump administration.
That's right. Well, and before that, we had one over many, many years.
NAFTA, and then it was redone.
And before that, we had an auto pact, which went back to 1964. So we've had a lot of agreements. My point is, you don't just threaten to do things which end up causing huge challenges for both countries in the marketplace. And you don't do it by putting a tax on consumers and a tax on producers that's going to end up making the economy less efficient.
You understand the trade deficit argument.
I do, but I want to put it to you that when it comes to the overall economic relationship, when it comes to services, when it comes to tourism, when it comes to the number of Canadians who are investing in a whole variety of ways in the United States, it's a win-win situation between our two countries.
Now, interestingly enough, that deficit is very close to what our current deficit is from the fiscal announcement. I believe we were at 62 billion. That is 64 billion. So we are not doing good when it comes to that. But he also claims that this is a win-win situation. Well, there are plenty of economists who don't believe that. They say that we will be crushed if we try to do this dollar-for-dollar tariff. Take a listen.
Some economists warn fighting the U.S. tariffs tit for tat is a losing battle.
And for the mouse to attack the two-ton elephant and say we're going to get in there and beat him up and knock the mouse, the two-ton elephant out, it's just preposterous. And so we're going to lose.
Unfortunately, that's the truth, and we may be able to do a little bit of damage if we do this dollar-for-dollar tariff situation to the U.S., but their economy is 10 times the size of ours. We are definitely going to be hit harder, feel it more, go into a recession, lose a lot of sectors like the auto one that was just reported. So in the end, it's not worth it for us to not simply do what Trump has asked. He's laid out a plan, secure the border. Let's focus on that. Let's see how that goes. Now, one other thing I will point out, he does have a special report in that's supposed to be due at the beginning of April 1st. And now that he's put this month-long ban, or pause, I should say, on the tariff situation, that basically takes him to when the report would be finished. So maybe that's also what he's trying to do. Wait till then he can implement tariffs again once he finds the report and gets whatever information he's looking for. But until then, I think we follow what Danielle Smith says, de-escalate, try to be more diplomatic. The premiers are going over to the U.S. I think it's next week, and just keep the conversation going. As always, love to hear from you guys, and I will catch you guys on the next one. Thanks so much.